At night Winter's mother came back. He asked, "Why are you back?" Line hesitated at Winter's irritable tone. "Your money has made their condition much better. I wanted to thank you. Then just send a telegram." "What a waste of time this is," he replied. Line closed her eyes at his coldness. He continued, "Mother, it's not that I don't understand. But what you did was unforgivable." Line hung her head, her shoulders were trembling. Winter clucked his tongue. He spoke, "Past events aside, if it's more money you want, I need you to tell me something. Do you know anything about people having their bodies switched?" She replied, "Not really. I have heard there are a few conditions in which that can occur." He continued, "Okay, then, what I really want to know is," he said glumly, "how does someone that experiences that die?" At his words Line was startled and she spoke. "Huh, what? Why are you asking such a thing?" "Die," he spoke. "I plan to die 3 months from now. But dying just switches my body with my wife's, and death continues to elude me. I own too much, and I'm tired of it. Of course, I'm leaving it all to my wife. Don't you dare try to get your dirty paws on it." Line asks in a trembling voice. "Does your wife know about this?" He chuckled and spoke. "Of course not. Don't talk to anyone about this, unless you no longer need money for your children." Line then spoke. "Why would you think such a thing? Doesn't this whole building belong to you? Why would you want to die when you have so much?" Line had thought that Winter had a good life. Even when she'd worked at the restaurant and seen him being beaten and locked up in the stables, she thought it would probably be better than living with her. She'd been thankful he was still alive. She'd left for Alika when she was certain he'd soon grow up and be able to fend for himself. She'd kept wondering about Winter after she had more children, and then heard news of his marriage, his failed attempt at a title. The marriage had gone on, however. She'd thought Winter was doing okay. Winter spoke. "Just tell me how I can die." She then spoke. "Not everyone experiences these body swaps. As far as I know, it won't occur in the event of an accidental death or death due to disease. So I can't die on purpose." He'd expected it would be something of the sort. Winter tutted. That meant he would only be able to die when he wasn't intending to. It probably wouldn't be hard to get murdered if he loosened security around him a little, considering the many enemies he had. Should he wait for someone to come along and try to kill him? He had to die once the 3 months were up, however. While Winter thought, Line held out a pouch. "Don't say that. Take this. You used to like these when you were little." Winter took out an envelope he'd already prepared from his inner jacket pocket and held it out to her. Line took it and hesitated. Winter gave a hollow laugh. He then spoke. "No need to make a face like that. There's no one in the world anyway who'll love me without wanting something in." Then she left. "I want to hold hands." Violet's voice suddenly rang out in his head. She'd said she didn't need anything, and instead had something she wanted to do. She'd taken his hand and smiled. There was only one person in the world who only wanted to hold his hand. Winter thought of her hands, hands he would no longer be able to hold, and looked at his big, rough palms. Winter set out late at night without a bodyguard, and Hyel followed him out. "Where are you going at this time of night without any security? This isn't Lackround. You should take one with you." Winter got angry and shouts. "Don't meddle," he retorted as he began walking away. He walked to the dark alleys in the outskirts. The road that led to them had a sign warning that this was a crime-ridden district and that going about alone was not advised. The surroundings were quite dark. Winter walked on without a second thought. He found a bar as he went along, so he took a seat and began drinking cheap beer nonstop. He walked over to some young men who were drinking boisterously and punched one of them in the face. "What the hell is with this guy?" the guy shouts. One of them threw a bottle of beer on the floor. He was about to punch Winter, but apparently their difference in stature convinced him otherwise. He just fumed instead. He grabbed Winter by the collar at least, and Winter leaned down to give him a better grip with a satisfied look on his face. Another young man pulled on his friend's shoulder. "Hey, let's just ignore him. There's something strange about this guy. What the hell is wrong with him?" All of them looked confused but backed away, apparently afraid something was up. "Here, stab me," He wondered if it counted as suicide if he was the one who provided the weapon. Seeing him offer them a knife, the men swore at him with guarded looks and got up from the table. Feeling Winter's strength from the grip on his arm, the man paled. Instead of stabbing him further, he dropped the knife and desperately rushed back to his friends. This man is completely insane. I told you we should just leave. It's best to simply ignore crazy bastards like him. The bunch swore at him and flipped tables and chairs, making a mess of the place. Then they proceeded to leave the bar. His first attempt having failed, he muttered, Why can't I end my own life?" Winter woke the next day on the hotel bed, feeling perfectly fine. The soft sheets made him frown. Finally feeling the hangover, he sat up and Hyle walked in with a grimace. "Sir, you don't remember how you got back, do you?" "Do you think I would?" Winter replied. Hyle continue. "You passed out at the bar, and the owner of the bar moved you to a bed. The owner found your business card in your wallet and came to me this morning, so I brought you back. It cost exactly 5,000 lon. It ended pretty cheap, actually. That's a hellishly expensive beer." Winter muttered. Hyle continue. "What is it that you want, exactly? What can I do to make you stop with this juvenile foolishness? There are limits to what I can do to cover for you, you know," said Hyle, giving him a deadly glare. Hyle didn't have the warmest of faces, and now he looked ready to kill Winter if he bothered him any further. Winter replied, "I went there to die. Don't pay them next time." Hearing this, Hyle was too stunned. He then spoke. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Just leave me to die," said Winter with a frown. Hyle clamped his lips and said in slow, clear tones, "I'll pay again to bring you back if this happens again. And after that, I'm quitting." "All right." Having remembered something, Winter called out to him as he left, "Don't breathe a word of this to Violet." Hyle was unable to contain his temper. He screwed his eyes shut and shouted, "And if you die that way, I'm telling the little mistress immediately that it was suicide. And she won't even come to your funeral." He stomped out of the bedroom with a disgusted look. Hyle left the hotel immediately. The stress from all this manhandling piqued his stress levels. He had his own house in the capital, but here his only lodgings were at the hotel. He had only one place to go. Winter was angry, but his hangover was killing him. He muttered, "Shit, it's harder to die than it is to build a hotel." He lay in bed with his arm over his eyes to obscure the bright sunlight when he heard the door open. "You're here," he said. "You knew it was me?" asked Violet. "You sound different from other people when you move about." "Really? Like what?" she asked. "Haughty," said Winter, both hands covering his head. "My head's splitting open." Violet laughed a bit and then spoke. "It's your own fault. Are you here to get angry at me?" he asked. "Yes. Why did you drink so much?" Violet had come to scold him, but from Winter's perspective it was more of a reward than anything else. It made him decide he'd drink like this again whenever Violet refused to meet him. Winter sat up and Violet looked surprised at the wound in his neck. She asked, "What happened to your neck?" Winter felt his neck with his hand and lied without missing a beat. "What? I don't remember. I had too much to drink." "What? Winter," she muttered. "Ouch, that stings," Winter said irritably, though he'd brought it upon himself. "Don't touch the wound. Do you want to torment me?" "I'm trying to take a closer look," she replied. Seeing that Violet wasn't going to give up, he grabbed her arms and pulled them down towards the bed. He then grumbles, "What good will that do? You're not a doctor." "I think my shoulder must be infected. I can't really stand." "What? Let me see." Winter spike. "Are you a doctor?" she replied. Violet had realized that reasoning wasn't enough to control this man, unlike normal mature adults. The maneuver had quieted Winter for a change. Violet tucked away her stick and brought out the carrot. "Now that I know the situation, I'll forgive you for suspecting me of having an affair. You're a victim, too." "Really?" he replied happily. She continued, "Yes, of course. That doesn't mean you were right to do what you did, but I've been angry at you long enough." Winter was grinning. He shouted outside the door, My wife is here. Where are the refreshments? Yes, sir, someone outside the door said, startled. Violet flinched at his shouting. Winter grabbed her arm and pulled her up. Good timing. We have to pick out the dress you'll wear for the party. She was confused for a second, then she spoke. What? You didn't even tell me I have to go to the party. I've told you now. Feeling even his hangover subside, he dragged Violet out of the bedroom. Let's go with blue, Winter said. I prefer white. There's a lot of white on the first floor, which is the party venue. She replied. Blue, Winter repeated. I want white. Violet gave her words. He continued to insist. Blue is better. It makes you look the part of the hostess. What are you looking for? A camouflage? Taken aback by the statement, Violet clammed up. Winter's eyebrows knitted obliquely at her disgruntled expression. He muttered, What? I'm buying it. I don't get a say. Violet led a sight. You're not giving an opinion, you're being obstinate. He continued. You think you aren't obstinate. You're just as bad. Do you think there's anyone in the world that treats me as badly as you do? I treat you badly. Her eyes went wide at the shocking accusation. Thankfully, before the two could really fight, an employee brought a trolley and placed tea and desserts on the table. They sat at the table and sipped the tea. It was brewed just right. It's good. Winter leaned back at an angle. Your maid told me the tea temperature you prefer. You also prefer not to have any stray hairs hanging out when you tie your hair back, and prefer neat clothing designs but don't care about the color. She told me all that. Then suddenly Violet's eyes saw the newspaper from Lackround. She asked, Is this Lackround newspaper? He replied, Our cruiser arrived moments ago. Because it has been traveling to Lackround for sending the invitation. She then grabbed the newspaper and started reading. The newspaper detailed that there was a new head for Margrave House Heston, the most powerful family in Lackround. That there would be a new person heading the house had been expected and wasn't surprising in the least. What was shocking was the announcement made by this great house, beloved by the citizens of the Lord for its important role of guarding the northern border. House Heston has always been a house that guards the throne. How can a new head of the house be regarded as one without the king's blessing? The message from Heaton was written. I, Curzon Heston, hereby request the blessing of the King of Lackround. Reading this, Violet was in utter disbelief. This was so absurd that Violet laughed aloud. She spoke. Is this a request to bring back the royal house? They want Ash to be the king. Yes, that looks like it, Winter replied. This is serious, right? She folded up the newspaper. She spoke. It's not a request to restore the royal house just yet, but it's true that Ash has to perform a ceremony to acknowledge the new Heston Margrave. That will mean formalities undertaken as the royal house, and people will see that and begin to consider Ash Lawrence the king, even though the throne no longer exists. He'll be the constitutional king who always takes care of such large events in the country. That'll allow him to slowly cement his position as its leader. Winter tutted and swore. That, son of a bitch. Then closed his mouth because he was afraid of Violet's scolding. Violet looked disappointed. Even the great, respectable House Heston was doing the wrong thing to maintain capital and power. This was disappointing, even if it was how things worked in the world. House Heston had the support of the entire population, and Ash had no choice but to plan a ceremony to acknowledge the new head of the Margrave House Heston. Ash had been forced to return the Long Leawood land to her, and he didn't have the money to move a great house like House Heston. Violet began to suspect that perhaps she'd been the commodity used in this deal. The previous Heston Margrave was 68 this year, and his son who was taking over the role was 47. His wife had passed away recently. Feeling the onset of a headache, Violet brought a hand to her forehead. It can't be. Her brother couldn't be intending to marry her off without even telling her. Her brother was capable of such a deed, yes, but not House Heston. Violet calmly folded the newspaper. She muttered firmly, never. She wouldn't sit still and let that happen. Rather than being forced to stand at some wedding she didn't walk, she'd run away somewhere even farther. And if there was some way for her to win with less effort, she'd take it. The scene shifts to the next day at Violet home. Jen walked in and began to fuss over it. "Little mistress. Tada," Jen said again, and Violet recovered enough to speak. "What is with that revealing dress?" "A gift from Lord Blooming," Jen replied. Violet replied, "I told him not to send." Jen said, "He said it was very cheap. The finish is not at all high quality, as you see here. There are no ornaments, either." Jen lifted the dress for her to see. Jen's description was far from correct. In fact, the dress was immaculate. Furthermore, Violet had never worn such a fancy dress that revealed her legs, shoulders, and chest as much as this one did. "He said he would take you to a conic bar wearing this. I don't know why you fought, but he said it was to be a make-up date." "A sudden date," Violet muttered. Jen asked, "Will you be going? I know he's of mixed blood, but how can a person like you go somewhere so?" Jen regarded Violet as the most precious person she knew, and didn't like the idea of Winter taking her to a secret bar that not many even knew the location of. Violet, on the other hand, disliked the dress. She had to try it on, at least, so Jen began to help her put it on. Violet was wondering why Winter had sent such a dark dress when he knew how sick she was of such colors. When she'd put it on, however, she changed her mind. The dress was made of the highest quality fabric and was lighter than it looked. Even the slightest movement made it shimmer with a faintly different color. It showed off the soft skin on her arms and legs, which she'd always covered over in the Blooming mansion. Instead of imparting a stifling, dark feeling, the dress looked elegant and modern. Violet walked over to her and opened the door, and Winter looked at her for a moment. Then he opened his mouth and spoke. "Did you cut your hair?" Seeing his surprised expression, Violet decided to have a little fun. "Yes, it was getting a bit hot." He continued, "You should have asked me about it." "Why? So you could tell me not to cut it?" Violet replied. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. "I was thinking I'd start taking more of an interest." "What?" She spoke. He spoke. "Before you died for the first time, you cut your hair. You asked me at that time if you should cut your hair, remember?" "Yes," she replied. He continued. "I told you to do as you liked because I really thought the choice was yours to make, but people swore at me when I told them what I'd said. They told me I sounded like I didn't care. That's not how it is. I just meant that I didn't mind whether you cut your hair shorter or not if that's what you wanted. And in the event that you asked my opinion again, I was planning to give you a more proper answer." Violet had an odd expression on her face. "What were you going to tell me?" He continued. "I've learned a thing or two about talking to women. Go on, try me." She then spoke. It's getting warmer and I thought I should cut my hair." "I see. I guess that would be cooler in the warm weather." His casual reply made Violet laugh. She began speaking again. "Oh, but I like long hair better." He spoke. "Oh, is that right? I feel that way too. But it'll be a problem if it feels stifling, right?" He replied. She continued. "I can tie it up. I think that would look cool and cute." He replied. Winter kept up his replies to the end, nodding at her. Violet burst into laughter. Then she spoke. "What is that? So you don't actually have an opinion? I really don't mind either way, but saying that would make me sound uninterested." He replied. "You still prefer longer hair, right?" She asked. "No, now that you've cut it, I prefer it shorter." He replied. "I didn't cut my hair. It's been tied up and rolled inwards." She answered. "You should have told me so. Longer hair it is, then," Winter said quickly. Violet's eyes drooped with laughter at his adroit change of tack. Finding Jen's skills surprising, he looked at Violet's hair and mumbled, "I didn't know you could do something like this." "Fascinating," Violet muttered. "Jen is very good at these things." Having had a good look, Winter held out his arm so Violet could take it. She wrapped her arm around his softly and he began to walk. "It looks good on you," he said. She asked, "Why did you choose a black dress?" "To make the expensive gems stand out." He replied. She continued. So they're expensive even for you. I'm scared I'll lose them. He told her. They're insured. If someone steals it, the insurance company will go after them with a shotgun, so no worries. But if you don't like the dress, you can put on a different one. There's lots of them at the hotel. Moments later, they arrived at some kind of warehouse that housed the bar. Violet asked quietly, "This is a bar?" "Yes," he replied, walking towards it and knocking on the black-painted wooden door. Violet was feeling a little excited. This felt like a game of hide-and-seek. It was bright and cheery inside, and filled with people who either had the conic gray eyes, or silver hair, or both. Winter pointed with his chin at the menu on the table. He asked, "Any foods you know?" She replied, "I've never heard of these dishes before." "Chianti, is it?" "Chianti." He corrected her. "I see." Violet looked uncomfortable as she nodded. Winter grinned. He spoke. "Happens to me too, at times." "What?" she asked. He spoke. "I asked for blue plaid at a boutique and the seller told me it's called Latika. Apparently it's the name of the person who made it. How was I supposed to know? Can you tell?" Violet stared at him without replying, and Winter grumbled in outrage. "Well, of course there's no chance that you didn't know that, princess. Blue plaid is called Latika. A person named Latika of House Genis popularized it. And I have no clue what to order, so please order something you eat often." Violet quickly explained, changing the subject afterwards and pushing the menu towards Winter. Winter thought long and hard as he inspected the menu. He spoke, "Let's go for something exotic." "Exotic?" she repeated. He continued, "Yes, nobles like exotic, though they don't like outlanders." "You're right," nodded Violet without denying it. Winter thought for a moment before saying to the server, "Hey, bring us an ishing." The man was surprised. "Really? You never buy us anything. What's the occasion?" Winter replied, "Why would I use my money on you? I wonder if brazenness is in the conic blood." Winter looked ready to grab the man by the collar. He dashed away in fright. He proceeded to bang at the bell hanging to one side. "Mr. Winter is buying us ishing." "What? Really?" the guest muttered. "Thanks, Winter." Everyone began moving about gleefully, and Violet got up as well, confused as to what was going on. She said, "I've never seen something like that before." Winter replied, "I've never lived among conics so I have no first-hand experience, but in their culture they celebrate by pouring in every food they have into a pot and boiling it using a traditional sauce. It's quite banal, if you ask me." "Fascinating," she replied. Winter had expected Violet to think it rude for everyone to gather around a pot and share the food. Instead, her eyes were sparkling like gems with curiosity. The broth was already boiling and the foods were cooked in no time. The employees gave out bowls to everyone gathered around, and people sat around the pot and helped themselves using the ladles hanging on the pot. Violet also brought some in her dish and sprinkled some conic condiments on top. She tried some and broke into a smile. "This is wonderful," Winter spoke. "It has the greatest meat content among conic foods." "And you're a picky eater," mocked Winter. Violet glared at him over her bowl. Winter snickered and began eating himself. The evening air was quite cool, but sitting in front of a boiling stove made the temperature just right. People danced and drank around the pot. The jolly meal was nearly over when a young man holding a rectangular paint-covered wooden container approached them. The young man spoke. "You've fed us, so would you like some free body paint?" Winter instantly grabbed him by the collar. "Are you trying to get your dirty hands on my wife?" The young man was frightened. He spoke. "No, I just thought you might want some traditional conic body paint." Winter continued. "You're trying to draw Outlander body paint on the Lacrown princess." The man said. "The paint will come off in a month." The young man blubbered. Violet grabbed Winter's arm and lowered it. She asked, "Where should I get the body paint done?" Winter spoke. "You should learn to refuse." "Why aren't you calling anyone rude today?" She replied. "You think I call everything rude. Besides, you have one too, behind your left shoulder." Winter tutted. Violet pointed to her left shoulder. Please draw one here. Yes, miss, it won't take long. The young man put down his wooden box and took out a pen with bluish-black ink. He carefully drew onto Violet's shoulder while she remained seated in her chair. A unique conic pattern of flowers and snakes trailed across both her shoulders. Moments later, the pattern was finished. Violet looked back at Winter. How does it look? Violet asked. He's got skills, at least. But why would you get one? He replied. She replied. Because you have one. He asked. What does it have to do with me? Why would you follow the traditions of these petty creatures? He asked, frowning. Violet frowned even more deeply. I told you, you have one too. Your hotel is named Conic Hotel, and you follow conic traditions. So why do you keep berating your own blood? Her quiet anger placed him at a loss for words. He turned his head and changed the subject. The opening party is a few days from now. That won't come off before then, he said, backing away. Violet, perhaps sorry about the angry outburst, spoke in a more playful tone. Come to think of it, you didn't even invite me to the party properly, did you? We made an agreement of sorts. He replied. She continued. What did you do when you were asking me to come here? I bought you a dress and told your maid about it. He replied. She spoke. Now, is there any way to request a date? Winter grinned from ear to ear and said mockingly, No, Miss Violet. Don't mock me, she said peevishly. Winter held out his hand. Will you go to the hotel opening party with me? The nobles of Lacround will also be there, so it may not be an entirely happy occasion. If you feel like it'll only bring back bad memories, you don't have to come. But I would like it if you attended the party as the wife of the host. Violet tilted her head slightly and looked down at his hand. She put her hand on top of his and pulled. All right. Even if she was preparing for divorce, there was a lot to think of as the wife of the party host. When she arrived at the hotel, she found the floors to be white marble and the walls finished with copious amounts of gold. It looked like some kind of huge temple. Winter gestured with a finger towards Violet, who stood at the entrance, and took the lead. The rooms of a hotel are the most crucial aspect, the entrance is the first impression. It has to be perfect no matter what. Elegant, but not inconvenient. She spoke. I see, but Winter, can you slow down? He replied. I have a lot to tell you, so walk faster. Violet felt like a new recruit as she walked after Winter. The hotel in Chiron was on a different level from the hotel she'd seen in the capital. The lobby spanned 2 floors with huge chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. The second floor, which one could access through the central stairs, featured tables arrayed in a circle skirting the walls. It was one of the 3 restaurants of the hotel, and offered a view of the sea from every single seat. From the front entrance there was the reception desk of the left and a stage opposite for musical performances. An artificial waterfall stood right next to the stairs, and colored glass sparkled within. Violet looked down at her shabby outfit and grabbed his arm. I'm going to have to change. I'm not dressed properly for this place. He smiled and spoke. I'm glad you know. She continued. I'll go back and. They're in the room. He gestured to an employee who'd been about to follow them, to stay back. He had Violet get into the elevator first, then followed her in, closing the door. Moments later, they arrived at the highest floor. He told her, the entire floor here is a single suite. No matter how much money one has, only members of our social club can use this suite. No exceptions, not even for royalty. I see, she muttered. He continued, you should try and look a little more surprised. You're taking the wind out of my sails. The multi-floor suite was obviously perfectly built, even at first sight. The bar had a unique design with pebble-shaped ornaments, and the meeting table and sofas near the balcony felt exceptional. Winter spoke. Here, clothes for you. I brought some here for today. Winter said casually, and headed for the dressing room. Seeing that Violet refused to take any gifts, he was now claiming that everything was his. Violet wondered what this man wanted from her by using all this money on her. The answer was clear. He sought to be loved. Just as he'd continuously poured out money for his parents, just as he paid his employees a very high salary. What Violet hated the most was how her own heart was betraying her, becoming excited even though she knew it wasn't because she meant anything to this man. Violet took the dress. He spoke. It's odd, though. You don't usually care about how your dress looks in relation to your surroundings. She replied. This is your workplace. No woman wants to wear random clothes and meet people at her husband's workplace. He muttered, oh, you're saying it's my fault. She replied, why are you twisting my words? I'm changing for your sake. He continued, I twisted them so I could hear you say that, Winter said mischievously. Violet gave a small sigh. He grabbed her by the waist and began to loosen the dress ribbons at her back. Violet hesitated. What are you doing? I'm helping you, he replied. Compared to the suite outside, the dressing room was small. Violet pushed him away, but they were still only an arm's length apart. Winter untucked her white blouse from her dress. And he said, I want to kiss you. She then spoke, do as you like, but this time is really the last. If I move away while you're kissing me, it's because you did something strange, so it'll be your fault. He continued, don't miss a single detail, do you? She gets little angry and spoke. Don't mock me, I'm serious. And why must you always try to kiss me at moments like this? He replied, what moments? She then said, when I don't want to. Winter stepped towards her and their bodies met. He lifted her chin with his index finger so she was looking at him, and mumbled, when I'm looking at you like this, you're always asking me to kiss you quickly. She replied, that's not because I want it, but because I find it uncomfortable to be looked at that way. Oh, what a picky princess, he said playfully. He still held his face close to hers, but not quite touching. As Winter said, Violet found it hard to stand it when he stalled close to her like this. She bit her lip and said in an involuntarily plaintive voice, this really is the last time. All right, don't make any more of those weird excuses. He replied, I always keep my promises. She continued, don't lie. I've never seen anyone more unreliable. Winter grinned at Violet's criticism. He hugged her waist tight and wrapped the other hand around her neck. He kissed her. Violet's shoulders trembled. Winter's hands felt strong. The passionate kissing made her knees buckle. Violet was about to slide downwards, so Winter pushed her and kissed her thoroughly. The inside of her mouth was scoured and Violet's breath grew hot. She began gripping Winter's shirt, wrinkling it. Winter held his hand over hers as if he found the action endearing. They kissed until the small dressing room grew noticeably warmer. Belatedly, Violet pulled herself together and pushed him away. Winter also seemed to have recovered a little of his composure. The heat didn't dissipate even though they were apart. It instead grew hotter, filling their bodies with heat. Winter groaned and spoke. This is driving me crazy. Violet asked, why are you breathing so fast? You're breathing that way, too, he replied. Winter was turning his head this way and that to avoid meeting her eyes. Answer me, why are we breathing so fast? She hesitated then spoke. It feels strange. Winter continued. What's strange about it? And why are you pulling me like this? What do you want to do? Violet looked at Winter's tormented expression. I just want to know why you won't look at me. Winter spoke gravely as if this was a life and death situation. We're still a married couple. Yes, she replied. He continued. And the look on your face tells me you'd very much like to take me to bed. Don't lie, she spoke. I'm serious. I get that look a lot from women. Violet frowned and glared at him. Winter thought to himself that not even the worst perverts the world had produced had received such a look of revulsion. He continued his attempt to tempt her. So he spoke. Just take me to bed. I won't hold you responsible. She frowned and spoke. You're wrong. You're not doing this because it's me. This is just instinct. Everyone has it, and so do you. And it's surfaced now, that's all. He continued. Use me. I'm always thirsty for it, he joked. Violet didn't respond. She was considering whether this feeling of her chest heaving, This desire to take all Winter's clothes off and touch his entire body was really sexual hunger. She closed her eyes as if giving up and nodded. Winter carried her and walked out of the dressing room. Her body soon fell on the bed, and Winter climbed on top of her. Violet was insistent to the end. She spoke. "It's not me, it's you." He laughed a bit then spoke. "It's always me. And if you want to think of it that way, go ahead." She asked, "Please turn out the lights." He replied, "They've been out from the start. The room has great lighting. What can I do about it?" After a while then she spoke. "Well then we can wait until evening." He frowned. "It's too late." "You agreed to this." She said. "Don't walk over my words. Wait, what are you doing?" "This is not allowed by House Lawrence." Winter starts kissing her but Violet can't believe what he is doing. He replied, "You hate to be called a princess, don't you? So don't pretend you are one in moments like this." She shouts. "Wait, what?" Violet's voice broke up. Her eyes were filled with consternation, then with pure pleasure. The two came to their senses 5 hours later. Violet, wishing to pretend nothing had happened, took a shower and dressed herself. She moaned as she flopped onto the bed. Winter, on the other hand, was humming as he came back to the bed. Seeing Violet fully dressed, his face was filled with dissatisfaction. He spoke. "Where are you going? Didn't you say you have a lot to show me? Our schedule is a mess because of you." Violet sounded angry. Winter tutted and laid her softly onto the bed. "Don't do anything stupid, and lie down. We can do it tomorrow." She frowned. "How can you do this to me? You didn't hate it, did you?" He replied. She hesitated then replied, "I simply couldn't speak." He then spoke. "Well, why couldn't you?" "It's because you liked it." She cursed him. "You're a scoundrel." He laughed at Violet's naive words. "You can't say anything worse, can you?" She frowned and spoke. "You're arrogant, rude, and a sex addict." She was still in shock, and her best rendition of swearing sounded extremely cute to Winter. It made his head spin. He lay down beside her. He hugged her close and mumbled, "This is it." "What do you mean?" she asked. He continued, "This was the married life I wanted." "What do you mean by this?" Violet asked, embarrassed to have her face buried in his chest. Winter closed his eyes. Being naked, having sex like animals, then sleeping, skin against skin. That sort of thing. Violet's face fell at his words. It came as a shock to her that just as she'd wanted a married life where she could share tea and chat, Winter had also had something he wanted. He'd asked her what kind of couple they'd be if they couldn't even converse without brushing their hair. Her husband had told her what he wanted as well, but she hadn't understood. Regret filled her, and she sat up. When Violet left his arms, Winter looked up at her. "You don't like it?" Perhaps he'd always been paying close attention to her actions. 3 years. Winter had felt like a cold wall to her during those 3 years, but how had he felt about her? Had she seemed to always have her back turned towards him? Like she'd felt about him? Had he thought that she also refused to listen to what he wanted? He asked, "What? Are you crying?" Winter jerked up with surprise. Violet softly wiped her tears away with her palms and smiled. "I felt sorry." He asked, "For what?" She continued, "It was tough for me at times because I didn't understand you, but I've been thinking you probably felt the same. I'm sorry. I knew so little about you. This time I really, truly understand." Winter sat frozen, unable to even reach out to wipe her tears. He stared at Violet's smile. Then finally he wiped her tears and they hugged each other. Thank you for tuning in to watch this season unfold. Your support means the world to us. We're excited to continue the journey with you in the next story. Until then, take care and stay tuned for what's to come.